What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Book Binge on the King Crusoe YouTube channel. This is episode 13, and this week we are covering The Gunslinger by Stephen King. If you want to see previous Stephen King reviews, you can click right up there. I've covered Carrie and Salem's Lot so far, but in the coming months you will see reviews for obviously this because I'm doing it right now, but I'll also be covering The Shining, hopefully soonish. Probably in May, if I'm remembering correctly, depending on how I can fit things into my schedule. But then I'll also be covering more of The Dark Tower in coming months as well as I continue to read through this series. But first, we obviously have to start with The Gunslinger. At the time of recording, I still have yet to even start Book 2, but by the time you are seeing this, at the time of release, I should be somewhere in the middle of Book 3 or so. Something that I noted in my monthly reading wrap-up for February when I discussed that I had read this book in January was that I've seen this book surprisingly low in rankings for Stephen King material. Like, I even saw one person do a video on, ranking Stephen King books and put The Gunslinger at the very bottom of the ranking, and that very much surprised me. Like, especially after reading this book, I just don't see it. For me, the impressions that I got from this book and the time that I had reading it was very enjoyable, and I thought that everything was great. So let's kind of talk about the things that I think about the book in general. First off, the Western vibe is very fantastic. Like, I had a very fun time reading this. I'm not a very big fan of Westerns, whether that be movies or games or books. So the fact that I enjoyed this book as much as I did, or at least enjoyed the vibe of it, was very surprising. Now, I know that future Dark Tower books all have a very different vibe to them, and I don't think any of them, as far as I've been informed, I don't think any of them bring back the Western vibe, at least to the extent that The Gunslinger utilizes it. But that's fine. I mean, for this short of a book, the vibe definitely worked for me. Throughout the story, you'll encounter many flashbacks. I think these are very good, even though some of them are admittedly a little bit confusing, like I had a hard time deciphering what some of them meant. But I do know that basically, that at least in this revised version, everything was fixed up to greater foreshadow things to come in the series. So I'm probably actually going to try to carve out time to reread The Gunslinger after I finish the series just to see what those things are, because at this point, as a first read, I obviously don't know what a lot of this stuff means. Like, plenty of the things that occur, especially in the flashbacks, definitely confused me, and I had a bit of a hard time understanding what was going on. But at the very least, I very much enjoyed all the characters. There aren't that many characters overall, but they're all very intriguing at the very least. Interactions and relationships between certain characters that occur throughout the tale are very interesting, particularly between the main characters traveling to the Dark Tower or trying to chase the Man in Black, because the first line of this book is the Man in Black fled across the desert and the Gunslinger followed. Obviously, that more or less encapsulates the entire plot of the story, to be perfectly honest. In one sentence, that is the plot of the story. So, as you are following the Gunslinger chase the Man in Black, there are some interactions that you see occur between certain characters, and they're all very nice. Like, I just like the interactions. Obviously, Stephen King did a very good job with characters here. And although this is the revised edition, so things are a little bit different and edited compared to the original version of the book, I find it very, very cool to think that Stephen King wrote this when he was 19, or at least started writing it when he was 19, or at least came up with the idea when he was 19. I know that 19 is a very important number in the series, although I'm not entirely sure why at this point in time. The main thing is, to think that King was so young when he wrote the original version of this book astounds me, because I couldn't do anything this evocative if I wanted to. Speaking of evocative, visuals and descriptions are very evocative. Just the imagery that King uses in this book is utilized to a great degree. Like, this includes the desert in chapters 1 and 2, this includes the flashbacks throughout the tale, this includes the mountains in chapter 3, this includes the inside the mountains of chapter 4, and even the philosophical sections of chapter 5. He does a very good job with this imagery. And speaking of philosophy, since I just mentioned that, King really has a fantastic way of using philosophical quotes, particularly in this book, but I've seen it in most of the books by him that I've read up to this point. Many of them are fantastic, and I just had to write some of them down. In fact, there was one section, I won't say the actual quotes here because a couple of them are a little bit spoilery, especially the one that I'm about to mention here. The preceding context to the multi-page philosophical passage of chapter 5 is very spoilery, so I'm not going to say that. But there is, like I said, a multi-page philosophical passage that's basically just a speech. It's kind of a conversation, at least part of this section of the book. There's a conversation, but a lot of it is just a speech. And there's just a whole lot of philosophical components to this. And I loved all of this. I want to write down the quote, but there's pages of it. There's, you know, probably 1,000 or more words to this philosophical section. And I just loved everything about it. I love everything about all of the philosophy in this book. That's not to say that it might be overbearing, though, because really, even if you're somebody who doesn't really enjoy philosophy, you're bound to find something intriguing and cool to the ideas on display here. And even if you don't, there's enough here that you'll enjoy moving forward with the series. But for me, and for anybody else who is very much intrigued by questions and the search for answers to those questions, this book definitely doesn't disappoint in that regard. But all those things being said, this book definitely is not perfect. And I will say that the worst section of the book is, like I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, that some sections are slightly confusing. Some things, particularly in the flashbacks, aren't super clear, especially to somebody first time reading. Not a lot of the things make sense. But really that's fine, because in a way, a lot of the Gunslinger just feels like a fever dream in the first place. So the fact that you don't understand 100% what's going on in plenty of the places is honestly perfectly fine, or at least it is in my opinion, because it makes sense for a fever dream to not make sense, if that, you know, if that makes any sense for me to say. And like I also mentioned, despite some of the things not making sense, there is still plenty about the Gunslinger that is worth reading. There's still tons of things about this book that I think are absolutely amazing. If nothing else, it made me very much excited to continue with the series. So even if there was nothing else going for the book, there's that. And really, I don't know if there's a whole lot more for me to say at this point. Like, this book is really short, and most of the specific thoughts that I have, like most of the things that I want to talk about, are very spoilery, and I'm not really into the vibe of doing whole spoiler reviews, so that's something that'll probably occur in like a full series discussion video later down the line when I've read all 7 of them, and maybe even reread the Gunslinger at some point. So with that being said, like, I'm sorry that this is a little bit of a shorter video, but I'm just going to say I absolutely recommend The Gunslinger. Like, I really enjoyed this book. If you're somebody who tried reading it once and did not enjoy it, try giving it another shot. And if you read it and didn't enjoy it and decided that that's why you don't want to continue with the series, I recommend at least giving it another shot so that you can continue, because if this didn't do it for you, none of the other books really follow in the same, you know, in the same path that the Gunslinger does. So yeah, that's right about it. Expect the next Dark Tower review probably in May, but also maybe June. We will see how things pan out. So again, sorry for a little bit of a shorter video, but I will see you guys this Friday with a temporary big update for the channel on the 1st of April with the April State of Affairs video. So if you want to know about some things that are going to be changing, at least for the next couple months on this channel, please go watch that video. So if you want to be let in on that, go ahead and like and subscribe and ring the bell if you want to be notified when any of those videos go live. All the fancy YouTube stuff. This is the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll be back again on Friday.